Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Let's see who we got here in the chat so far. Let's see, who was first? Kyle was first. Excited to see everybody. We're going to have a great stream today. I said, who's early? Kyle said, your mom. We got Christian, Mike, Hutch, super glad to see you. I am definitely excited about this topic too, for the exact reason that you mentioned as well. Jake and Chattin 105 once again. Good morning. Brad, welcome back. Glad to see everybody. So this is episode 3 of Inside Link. Really excited about this. Got a consistent stream for the first time ever. Feels good. So thanks for the encouragement behind the scenes, Kyle. Kyle actually set up a recurring email to me every Friday morning that was like, hey, can you send me the stream link today? And for weeks, I would just ignore it or delete it. But now we're actually good to go. So once we kind of get everything going and warmed up here, then I'm going to bring in Taylor. And what we're going to be going over today is not necessarily like the nitty gritty of creating custom blocks, but some of the things that you can do with them in Gutenberg and Blockstudio specifically. So if you're not familiar with creating custom blocks, they are extremely powerful, and with just a little bit of HTML and PHP, I promise don't be scared by that. It can get you, you can do some pretty amazing things. And with Blockstudio, it's come a really long way over the last 18 months since I've kind of had my eye on it. And one of the things that I think is really impressive about it is that the client editing experience that you can create with Blockstudio is simply just amazing. There's really nothing like it, which is why I titled this stream Client Editing Reimagined. Now, I know there's a school of thought of some people that don't let their clients edit their site, but really, I think that I think is a byproduct of the tools that you're using are way too complicated. And specifically like with Oxygen, I never wanted clients in Oxygen, but with Gutenberg, you absolutely can do that. So what we're going to take a look at is just some of the examples of the things that you can do. And for me, what's really cool about it is just the fact that you can set the parameters that somebody can edit, and they can't destroy the design. They could reorganize content, but you give them the ability to change the important things like, even sometimes files if there's like a downloadable PDF. They can really easily do that, but they're not going to screw up, proper link structures and all that sort of stuff. So custom blocks are really cool. And it's not something that I've delved in super deeply to. I've seen Taylor do a lot with it. And so what he's going to do is show us some of the amazing things that he's done. And of course, I'll bring Taylor in here in just a minute. But if you don't know him, Taylor Drayson is really active in the admin bar. He's active in the Premise Like Discord. And he's got a lot of community contributions, tons of code snippets, and just awesome, like I said, contributions to the community. And he has a website called snippetclub.com. We'll take a look at that later on. But yeah, so who else do we have in the chat? Mike still. Good morning, everybody. Taylor's waving in there. Thanks, dude. And here in just a second, I'll bring Taylor in. Let me see if I'm a pro streamer yet and can switch over in real time. So let's do this. Taylor, good morning, dude. How are you?
I'm doing good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. Loud and clear.
Awesome.
So like I mentioned, I've known Taylor quite a few years now. We got connected through the Oxygen Discord, I believe. I'm pretty sure you messaged me kind of out of the blue, and that would happen fairly often. Usually people were reaching out to me asking for help with their websites, but typically it was like I'm not trying to pay you. I just want your free help. But this was actually the reverse. Taylor said, hey, I have an idea for you. And from then we talk pretty much every single day. So Taylor has been...
Yeah, I don't remember why or how. I don't even remember because I'm pretty sure I reached out to you because obviously you were like the Oxygen poster boy for
for a while,
time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was probably why I don't even know why I reached out, but yeah, and then we obviously met up in person, went to WordCamp and stuff, and it's been pretty awesome.
That was really great. Yeah, Taylor was my personal London tour guide. It was awesome. Probably going to be again when I'm back.
Yeah, gonna be good.
Yeah. So Taylor is he and Kyle were one of the main two that were really pushing hard for me to come into the block ecosystem. And whatever block package you use, or perhaps if you don't even use a block package, that's what's so cool about these custom blocks we're going to talk about today. So Taylor spent a lot of time with Blockstudio, and they're just extremely cool. So essentially what we're going to do is just start off with maybe showing some examples of blocks and what you can do, and then maybe show, I don't know, if you have some code examples you can touch on, and then hopefully it's going to spawn some questions here in the chat. So if you guys have anything that you're curious about, you can stop us and let us know, or we'll come back to it. So
okay, what do we want to start with? Let's start with this one actually, because this is a very basic example. Can I see my screen?
Yeah, let me make sure that, let's see. This looks pretty good. It's not perfect, but it'll work. Okay, yeah, we can see.
This was a basic progress bar that I kind of built, and the way that it works is that you can basically change in the block. Oh, let me mute that so it doesn't come up. Mute for 2 hours. There we go. So I've got a custom block. Oh no, where did that go? That's not a custom block. I did make a custom block, but it didn't work. We'll choose this one then. Okay, so one of the things that we recently came kind of up with, Generate Blocks came out with, was the tab and the accordion, but we still don't have a slider. And that's something that I wanted to use on my personal website. Oh, sorry, my business website. And so I was like, I want a slider block, but I don't want to install Cadence or another block plugin just for that functionality. And then obviously have the dependency of having to keep updating it. If it breaks, it can change. It can change the structure of the actual HTML. So if you've written CSS to style it, they can just break it. So this is a slider that I built that allows you to actually add in Gutenberg blocks directly inside. So if I edit the page, what you'll see is I have a custom block called Dynamic Slider, and on the right here, you basically get to set your own settings, create your own settings. So I've kind of just mapped the slider library settings to toggles, which basically just allow me to. So if I click on enable pagination, you'll see when the block updates, it basically removes the pagination from here, so you don't see it. And there's a bunch of other settings, but you basically can actually edit the content with Gutenberg. So slide one, if we click on this one, this is my content for slide one. And, this is kind of what you're used to if you use the tabs elements and the query loop and things like that in Generate Blocks. You're kind of used to this. So if I go to Dynamic Slider front end, you can see my content is now in there. And then I also added the ability to add or use the query loop. So you embed the query loop block from Generate Blocks inside.
So you have a dynamic slider.
So you build out your template like you normally would. And then on the front end, you can see it loads all of my posts in from my post type.
So I think it's worth dissecting this, because what you have here is extremely cool. So this is a Swiper.js JavaScript library, right? That you turned into a Gutenberg block.
You just Splide, but yeah, it's a JavaScript library.
Okay.
Library that I use.
So for those of you that came from the Oxygen ecosystem, you might have seen my tutorial. It's actually probably, I don't know, maybe 3 years old now, but I created one on a dynamic slider, and all that is, like I just said, the Swiper.js JavaScript library kind of wrapped into a custom code block. And in this case, Taylor's taken that a step further by having this with those UI controls. Because in the approach that I showed, it was just a code block slapped into the page, and this is way nicer. So you have all the controls that are baked into that JS library, like slides per page and all those sorts of things.
But yeah, I haven't got all of them in there, but yeah, my plan is to add them in there, and you just map them into the JavaScript file, and it kind of just maps it to, if it's true or false, it sets them. Or I've got one that you can add custom navigation, so you can select a class to what you want your left and right arrows to be. So if you want to have your own custom buttons, for example, you can put them like outside. I mean, I'll show you. So my my business website that I'm rebuilding, which is still a work in progress. This was the original slider that I had built down here, and you can see that you've got custom buttons that go along. And this was where it originally came from, which is why I had, why I had added it, because I wanted a slider, but I didn't want to have to just install another kind of block. So this uses a very similar approach. However, this version used a repeater. So one of the fields that Blockstudio has is a repeater field, which I can quickly get an example of because he has all of them on the front end. Repeater.
So just quickly, this Blockstudio website that Taylor's on, it's blockstudio.dev. This is the plugin that essentially allows you to it shortcuts the work that it takes to build a native block, and it makes it a heck of a lot easier. And another thing that I'm really excited about, and we'll touch on in a little bit for something Taylor's working on, is that now with Blockstudio you can export and import these blocks. So if somebody else makes it, you could buy it or share it or whatever and import it into your site. So I think that this slider block eventually will be accessible to people, and you could easily import it. Is Blockstudio still a one-time purchase? Is it still a...
Yes, I mean that's probably, we should probably touch on this. So all of these blocks that I'm going to show you and I've built are using the Blockstudio framework. If you are a ACF user, you may have heard of ACF blocks. This is essentially a similar concept, but it doesn't require the ACF dependency. So on some websites that I build, ACF is not needed at all. And this is nice because it means I don't have to install ACF as a dependency as well as Blockstudio. I can just use the native fields that Blockstudio comes with. It comes with a bunch of fields kind of built in. They have loads of examples of what they look like. You've seen kind of the text ones and stuff. This is a repeater, so as you're probably used to with ACF repeaters, you can nest them as deep as you want, etc., etc. But yeah, it's a very, very simple way to create custom blocks without needing to know React. So Gutenberg blocks, by the native way, relies on React. You have to use update state because everything of Gutenberg is built with React, and so the blocks are. Whereas this method, the ACF blocks method, I think MetaBox had their own version as well. They all use PHP. So what it does is it basically takes your PHP and then they do React on their side in the back end to convert your PHP into a block. That's the way. So you can see here you have a block.json where you basically set all your fields up. ACF uses the block.json as well. You put your markup in, and then you have a styles.css and a scripts.js. Now, one of the biggest things that I like about Blockstudio is the fact that it has an editor. So one of the things that frustrated me when I first started using ACF blocks was the fact that you had to use an editor of VS Code, for example, and trying to edit plugin files on a live server is an absolute pain. You either have to SSH in, you will have to either develop locally and then push all of your changes, whereas it has a built-in editor in the admin dashboard, which makes it nice and easy to make changes on the fly if you are a live website builder, should we say, rather than local. It's got previews, formatting things, just like basically a normal editor. I think it uses the exact same editor that VS Code is, because VS Code is they have the web app, which then the Electron version just emulates. But it also does all of the on-queuing of your styles, so your scripts and your CSS, your JavaScript and your CSS. With the ACF blocks method, you have to set the path to your script file and your CSS file. This automatically does everything for you. So all you do is you add a new... that's the other thing, you have to register all your ACF blocks Blockstudio automatically registers when you see a new folder, it automatically registers that block and all of the assets for it. And there's different types of files that you can use. So there's a script.js, an inline script.js, a script view.js, and a script editor.js. So you can load script styles based on whether you want them to only be on the front end or back end, and whether you want them to be an external file or directly inlined. And that's the same for the CSS as well. And there's also a scoped version. So if you just want to use, here we go, styles.scoped. So it adds a custom hashed class to your block, and then you can then just write H1, for example, rather than having to prefix all your blocks with .my custom block, for example.
So
yeah,
that feature is super cool. And I want to mention something that, for those of us that are watching, including myself, that are not really super adept at JavaScript, that these blocks are even extremely powerful with just basic HTML and PHP. Like you could create a hero section where your client could edit the image, the H1, your paragraph tag, without touching anything. Like they literally would just have text fields to plug data into. Yeah, I mean, that's the example exactly.
There is a good example. It just has a heading, and it has a title, and then has a button text, and you can change that. If I zoom in a bit, you can see you have a title and a button, and you just update it, and it's just got styles like CSS and just HTML. There's no PHP at all, so you don't have to write PHP. It's not super complex. So if you just want to create blocks that are all kind of uniform, but just give them the access to actually just change the text or images, then you can do that, and you don't have to touch PHP at all.
I think this is
so it's very, very user friendly to start with, and then obviously you can get into the more complex stuff.
So Kyle said, I'm pretty lost. By the way, let me back up a little bit. You got a message in chat that said, Taylor is very handsome and quite knowledgeable, says Shiesty Up.
I appreciate it. Yeah, we can. I mean, we can recreate the block that they've got there if you want.
That would be awesome. Yeah, just to see it. I think seeing it in real time is something that would be pretty cool.
Let me hold down this thing here. So when you load the editor, so it uses a filter to create the editor, and you can restrict access, so only certain users have access, or you can do it based on the user ID and stuff like that. To create a new block, we right click and hit create block. You can also see as import. So if you have a site, like you've got a clone site that you do for all your projects, you can also create a block site that you can then import blocks that you need. We add a namespace, which just is a way to reference what it is, and we'll call this hero. What did he call it? Hero section. We'll call it hero section, and we can give it a name. You can have as many plugins as you actually want, so you can have lots of instances and things like that. So you can have like a WooCommerce plugin for custom blocks, and you can have a general. We start with our block.json. Some of these you can just leave, but for example, the category. So when you add it to the page, we can set where we want it to appear. So for example, you will see here there's a Blockstudio. I've got a Creative Tinker one, and I've got a Blockstudio one. But if we wanted to, we could put it into the design tab, which we can do. So if we set this, change this from Blockstudio to design, we'll hit save. Let's create a new page. Heroes section. And we should be able to find under design, we've got our hero section here. So we can drop that in. And at the moment, we have no fields, and we have all we have is hello world. So we'll hit publish on that. You can see there's no field settings.
Sorry about me moving my screen around, everybody. I'm trying to get it positioned properly so you can see most of it. There we go. That should be good.
Yeah, we're good?
Yep.
So the icon, this is a Gutenberg variable, which only takes in dash icons. However, Blockstudio allow you to set your own icons if you want to. So we can set an emoji if we want to. So we can do div. What emoji should we do? There we go. Let's do the party popper.
There we go.
If we hit save and move, not that one, this one. We go up to our page and refresh. You can see that our icon is now the party popper, and that also appears in the sidebar and everywhere else it gets used. We need to add 2 fields. So we can add our attributes, which is what our fields are. And the basic fields take in a label. So we can call this headline, or should we call it title? I need to put this into an object. There we go, label. And it takes in a type. So the type is the field. So it can be text, images, repeater, toggle, which is like a checkbox, select drop downs. And we need the ID, which is how we identify it. So if you use ACF, you're probably used to setting these, and we can just call this title. We can then duplicate this, and we can add in button text, and we'll just label that button text. And what we can do is they actually have a nice preview feature, which will actually show you the block. So this shows you your fields that you've created. And if we go back and refresh, we should now see we have a title and a button text in here. They don't do anything at the moment because we have to map them, but we have them in here so we can give them titles and things. And then we want to build our layout basically. So we close this. We can have a div, and we have to add a tiny bit of PHP to this. So B holds all of our field data, and then we just pass in the name of our ID. So if we just do that for now, and we refresh, we should see hero section. We've got nothing in there. This is my new title. If we do that, good. There we go. Okay, 1 second.
Trying to figure out, a couple people are mentioning your screen share is blurry, and I'm trying to figure out if it's my fault.
Let me see if I can change my resolution. Hang on, stream quality, 1440p.
Oh, there we go. I can already tell the difference. Yeah, that should do it. Do you want to quickly jump back to the Blockstudio JSON real quick so everybody can see that? That part was probably pretty blurry. So just to quickly recap, there we go. That looks great. Hopefully everybody
zoom in a bit. There we go.
will kind of concur. I think that should do the trick. Let's see. Well, yeah, okay, yeah, getting much better is in chat. Just to quickly recap, the top part of the JSON is, and Kyle confirmed zooming in helps too. You give it the main name of your block. There's the icon that you touch on and the category inside of your kind of add panel where it's going to fit. And then the next 2 sections that you can see kind of nested inside there are the 2 fields that we're giving the user the ability to edit. So these are simple text fields in this case. And now if you want to move back to the front end.
You have all of these that you can add. So links, numbers, text areas, there's a WYSIWYG. So you can add lots of those. And then title.
And now what you're doing in the PHP section is you're actually connecting that field that you just created to PHP to allow the user's input to update the actual block.
Yeah, so this A variable is a global variable inside of our editor, which holds all of our fields that we've just registered. And then you put in here, which is just the ID of the field you want to get. So title, button text, or whatever. And hopefully, if I refresh, we should / hero section. this is a heading, and we can see here, that's a
There it
heading.
is.
And then if you change a heading 2, it updates, and you can see, okay, I've got a duplicate there. You can see it updates as we change our values, which is quite nice. And if we look on the front end, there's our heading 2, although it's not a heading, it's a div. And you can see we only actually output the content or the information that we give Blockstudio. So there's no wrappers, there's no extra wrappers, no inner contents, no inner divs. Whatever you put in here is what is going to get rendered in the front end.
And you can
we can also add our button. So we want a href equals a button text. Oh, I'll see if I'll check chat for questions in a second.
Yeah, while Taylor's working on this, does anybody have specific questions? What do you think so far? It looks intimidating, but honestly, I promise it's not.
So the documentation could do with a bit more kind of getting started for people that are very, very new. It takes a tiny bit of time to understand why or how it works and kind of getting your head around it. But you see here, we've got a click me, which doesn't have any link at the moment. But if we go back into our block, or sorry, it doesn't have any text. I did that the wrong way. Here. Let's link to http permaslug.com, and our button text go here. Visit permaslug. There we go. And our text comes in, and so does our heading. I'm going to make that a H2, H1 quickly because it's annoying me. H1.
Yeah, that's what's cool about this is whatever HTML you set is what it's going to be. So like in Generate Blocks, for instance, with a headline, somebody could change it to a different heading tag and not know what they're doing. But this is a little bit more restricted, but still gives you enough flexibility.
Visit Snippet Club, for example, although the link is not set. And you see it says Visit Snippet Club. We could obviously then add more fields, like a link field or a text field that gives them the ability to change the text and the button, or the link and the button text. Can you live edit the text, or does it have to be edited in the site? Right, so I'll come on to that. So a good example is my... so I built a checklist block for my personal website. And it looks like this. And when I go to the back end, we use something called inner blocks. Inner blocks is a Gutenberg function that has been brought to Blockstudio, and it allows you to add in text or any other block inside of your block. So you think of your block as a wrapper. A good example would be the Generate Blocks container block that uses inner blocks because it's a wrapper which has a div, and then whatever you put inside gets put inside that div. So I've got it set here that I can add a paragraph, and if I wanted to, I don't know if we can unlock like that. I should be able to add more blocks in. I think I've limited it quickly. Let me just check. So you can set limits on stuff. So I've actually got a template in here that stops people from adding. So allowed blocks, I've got it set so you can only add the paragraph block. If I get rid of that and get rid of the template lock, we refresh, we should now be able to add more blocks in. There we go. So I can add an image block, and we will grab a nice picture of me. There we go. It's a bit big. 150. There we go. So I can add whatever I want in. Add some lorem ipsum. If we hit update, all of my text just goes inside my wrapper, my content wrapper. So anything I put in goes inside. And then you can use things like conditionals. So if we just get rid of this, me go back.
There's a question I was going to touch on real quick from Robin. I'm in doubt choosing Blockstudio or Bricks with ACF Flexible Content. I think ACF Flexible Content is probably one of the worst editing experiences personally for clients in particular. I've used it in 2 separate instances, and it's really difficult for them to understand the way that content is organized and how to add and edit. I thought ACF Flexible Content was amazing until I put it into practice, and then it kind of falls on its face, in my opinion.
Yeah, so ACF Extended makes ACF Flexible Content slightly better because one of the options allows you to have a preview or something. I can't remember where it is, but it allows you to basically switch between having the preview in the editor or in the back end of what the block looked like and then switching over to changing the settings. But for me, I think that ACF dynamic content or flexible content is very restrictive, and it was the whole point of moving to Gutenberg. Is I was trying to get away from having to hard code fields in, because if you want to update it in the future, you have to change the whole structure. You have to go in and change the way that everything's built. Whereas for me, I use these custom blocks as a way to create components. So I'm using generate blocks to build my layouts and things like that, but then I'm using components to put inside rather than building an entire section with Blockstudio. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
instead of giving you sections that they can then fill in the title like we did on this page here, instead of building up an entire section and giving you can change the heading here, you can change the button here, you can change the description text here, I would build that with generate blocks. And then if there's a bit of functionality or something that I want to be fixed or something, for example, I would then just build that one block and insert it into the section I need, because it gives you the flexibility and the control to change stuff. If it's something that needs to be repeatable, you could either use a repeater, or if it's like a card that needs to be used multiple times, for example, I would build the card once and then just duplicate that block 3-5 times, because then I know that each card design is going to be the same, but adding a new one is just a matter of duplicating it and filling in the content, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so I
absolutely.
kind of try to keep it componentized rather than building out entire sections, because you run into that. You run into the thing of everything's hard coded. You have no full control over the layout and the design, and making stuff slightly different.
Danielle, this was going back a little bit, but you said allowing the user to change the URL. You can absolutely do that. Taylor just didn't add that specific parameter into the block.
So in my checklist block, I actually do have that. So if I take this out, for example, so create modal block. If I go to the block here, I have a toggled complete button, and as you can see, when I tick it, it changes the icon and adds this completed by, and then there's that's actually a link field. So if I can click here and I can change the text. So visit modal block demo, like that, and you'll see it changes the text. And I also have access to whatever the href link is.
Yeah. So with this, I knew this, but just to clarify, you're not using this as a replacement for generate blocks and the content inside of it. This is for specific pieces of functionality, like your slider.
So this is very much for building. I was going to start on a tab and accordion block, but obviously I don't need to do that now. But you can see with the slider block, it's for stuff that the modal block, for example. Jonathan had a great tutorial on building a modal in Gutenberg with the generate block stuff. But obviously a lot of it relied on you adding classes and having a certain structure. I took this and kind of componentized it in a way, which is what I kind of have been doing, by making a modal block that you can then put whatever content you need inside. And this handles everything you need it to. So what you do is you add your modal block. So let's start from scratch. So you add your modal block. We add a trigger. So this is the hashtag thing that we wanted. So we can call this book. We'll call it ebook. And then we can add in whatever content we want. So we can add a headline. by my ebook. I want to put some padding on that quickly. 50 pixels. We can drop some placeholder thing.
This is way better than my iteration, because if you didn't have the right structure, you had to add like 2 or 3 different HTML attributes. You had to add 2 or 3 different classes, and if any of them were missing or didn't match, then it just didn't work.
So then you've got your modal block, and you can put whatever you want inside, obviously. You've set your trigger, and the only thing you have to do, which is kind of slightly manual, is go down into your data attributes, add data modal, hashtag ebook, and you're done. You hit update.
It's way better, yeah.
If we go to the front end, we should see our thing. Now, by default, it goes to 100% width, but I added the option for you to restrict that. So if I set 900 pixels, for example, that will then restrict it. We can actually set it to, if I set 600 pixels, does that update it? Yeah. So I've set it so they actually restricts the width in the editor as well, so you get a better idea of what it looks like. But we can set 600 pixels, and it's now 600 pixels. And then taking it one step further is, the other thing I didn't like is that you could see the modal in the editor no matter what. And if you have multiple modals on a page or whatever, it can take up a lot of space. So I added a collapse toggle, which basically just hides it and minimizes it. This has no effect on the front end. This is purely the back end. So if I hit update again and refresh, you'll still see my modal block works. But it's just so that if you've got a long page, you can see what modal it is, and you can expand it to change it, and then you can kind of hide it away, which makes it easy to, it doesn't get in the way. And so it's stuff like this where a lot of it, we can add in our own slider block by adding the JavaScript into WP Codebox and then adding our classes. But by just making it into a small block, we can keep everything together. All of our stuff gets on queued only if we use the block. And everything under the hood kind of is done for you, really.
Yeah, that's really
That's
great.
a good example of it, I think.
Kevin said that would at least overcome the massive limitation of Gutenberg that you can't control HTML tags properly. Yeah, if you're not using a block package like Generate Blocks, for sure. I mean, you can set whatever you want in these custom classes, like Zach said, for sure.
Yeah, so I saw a bit of Kevin's live stream the other day when he was doing some Gutenberg stuff. And, I agree that the core Gutenberg by itself with the rows and stuff are not great. And, you can't really build stuff with it. But, with Generate Blocks, you kind of get that div that we're used to in Oxygen or Bricks. And, now we've got Flex, you can very much have, the ability to create the types of layouts you want, where you can push buttons to the bottom of a card, for example, and things like that. And this this adds another layer on top where the standard functionality, because obviously that's all it is pretty much. Generate Blocks is a layout block library. This adds these extra features that we sometimes take for granted in things like Elementor, Bricks, Oxygen,
I think
that kind of come
the other thing that's worth pointing out is I think these blocks shine in situations where you have a more complicated or larger client site, that you're going to have people who are reasonably adept at WordPress coming behind you, but not super technical, but they need the ability to update content, reorganize it, move it around the page, and use it perhaps in like a custom post type. But you don't want them to mess up the design. And then ACF Flexible Content, like I said earlier, it just doesn't give you that visual representation. So I found that people, it struggled to use it, where this gives you like as much flexibility as you want to allow. That's what I think is so cool about this. So
and it's also, a lot of these blocks are reusable. Generate lets you change it. Pretty sure. So you can change a button to a link or a button, so an ahref. If we
container, it can be div or whatever, aside all those options.
Here you go, tag name, footer, article side, header. So you can change the HTML.
You can also just edit the code directly.
It's not, no. UL is probably the only one that you have, if you wanted a native marked up HTML, you'd have to use the list element. I think you can hook in to the tag name, and you probably could change it using a hook. But yeah, I mean, you could probably ask for it by Tom, and we'd probably be able to get it implemented. But yeah, I mean, there are some caveats and things. But for example, the markup for like the query loop and stuff, they're all kind of accessible, and they use the correct markup for like the article tag and things like that.
Kyle said, with the new version of GB, you can use CSS Grid really easily, but you have to write the CSS. Could you build a custom block that uses Grid?
Potentially. The tricky thing is that the sidebar field would have to be dynamically populated based on the number of containers or child elements it's got, which it doesn't support, which you can't do. You can get the context in child elements when you use the inner blocks function, but you can't go the other way. You can't change the above. You can't change the parent block from the child, for example. So I mean, there probably is a way, but it wouldn't be the nicest implementation. If you look at the way that Oxygen did it, they had a number of rows to change the span stuff, depending on how many child elements you had, which obviously we don't have access to be able to do with the current way everything's set up. Another block that I wanted to show was the map block. So I have a client that are an international company, and they have 3 offices, one in America, one in the UK, and one in Germany. And they wanted on their website a way to have the location pin marker on the map. And so I built this into a block which takes in latitude and longitude, so the coordinates essentially, the name, the address, and then you could set the height of the block. And then I can then duplicate this one map block multiple times through in the page and just change the latitude and longitude to the location that I want the pin to appear. And when you go to the front end and you click on it, your information pops up, and they're all independent. The way it's set up, they're all independent from each other, so they don't clash, and they're all separate. So if you change the text inside the marker, that's only going to affect that one block rather than all the blocks on your page.
So Zach said, you may have already answered this, but is there going to be a marketplace or community? Well, I'm really trying to push for that, because now there is an import-export feature that works well with Blockstudio. And I think that is really what will make this shine and usable for lots of people. Because I think
So I mean, Dennis doesn't have anything. He does have a small library of, where's the documentation? He has a small library of pre-made blocks. So if you know who Dennis is, he is the same developer for SPX, which he sunsetted and no longer exists. However, what he's doing is he's slowly converting all of the blocks or all of the components from SPX into Blockstudio blocks. So there'll be a big kind of library of ones that he has. So for example, there's a gallery, which includes a masonry, which is quite nice. The code, which is this one here, an icon, a slider, and image comparison. And so these are the slider and the stuff are like images compared to my slider, which you can put like Gutenberg content in. So I mean, I've got them here. So this is one of the sliders basically, and the gallery here as well is, it's masonry. And when you edit the page, for example, you can select the images you want. This is dynamic. I made mine dynamic to pull from like posts and stuff, but you can, you would just hard code them like you normally would, which is quite nice.
I think
something that I am working on.
Go ahead.
Say that about the marketplace thing, there isn't anything out there yet. However, I'm planning on releasing something called WP Block Vault, which is going to be basically a massive collection of all of the custom blocks, like some of the ones you've seen, like the slider, the modal, the mat block, and other pre-made stuff which are relatively useful for client sites and stuff like that, and just other sections. And I'm going to put them into a package that people can grab access to and buy in. Because of the import export, you can just upload it and import it directly to your site essentially.
Yeah, this is
Shameless plug there, but yeah.
No, please do plug it. Yeah, I was going to say that
I'll put the link in the chat for people that want to sign up to be notified.
For someone like me, it's like this whole implementation is awesome, but I'm not gonna take the time to really custom code these myself. I would just find a different way to do it. But if I had the ability to go grab it and just stick it into the page, I would almost certainly use it. So absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the blocks that I've built are because I needed them, because I needed that functionality, and it was either installed another plugin or just quickly whip something up. And because I can build them, I do. But like I said, for people that don't know how to, don't want to, it's a nice way of still getting the functionality without having to install another plugin. You have to install Blockstudio, but if you're using at least 2, you're saving the amount of stuff that all of the other blocks add. So rather than disabling the blocks you don't want to use or only enabling the ones you do, you only are uploading the blocks that you want to use or need to use.
And not only that, but like for instance, with the plugin I've mentioned before on stream called Gutenberg Slider, that's essentially just the same thing. It's a Swiper.js library just wrapped with some Gutenberg components, but it will load code in the wrong places, and then it also has these annoying admin nags in the backend that are like, review us, update, all those sorts of things, and that just won't happen with this Blockstudio implementation. It's just so much cleaner.
Same way ACF and MetaBox do make things easy. So to that kind of statement, it's ACF and MetaBox make it easier to create fields, but you still have to go in and put the work to create the front end markup. The fields alone don't do anything, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense, but just creating the fields don't actually make anything appear on the front end. So it's just a different way of creating essentially the same type of thing. I guess you can use a visual editor, and there are a couple of solutions out there. I think someone commented a link in Kyle's post on the admin bar about visually building. I think PainGrowing also has like a visual builder for these types of stuff. And I'm not saying Blockstudio is the only one you can use and the best one. That's just my preference. I like the dev, and this is the solution. Same with kind of why Cadence over GeneratePress and all of that stuff. It's preference over everything. But if you want a more WYSIWYG drag and drop block builder, then maybe PainGrow is something to look at, because they have a builder that you can create blocks and then you export them. And again, they build the React Gutenberg blocks that you need, but your implementation just has to be like the HTML and PHP that
I think Adam Lowe on his channel has done a fair bit with PainGrow, and he's asked me to take a look at it because of that reason, that it's got some other features that Blockstudio doesn't have, but they're similar in principle for sure.
I think you need to reverse engineer some of it, making it possible to save some patterns. Yeah. So I mean, I created a modal local pattern that my clients could drag and drop in, which already had like a template for a modal, for example. And it's kind of one of those things that once you've built it once, you can then just copy it over to any other site that you want.
Zach, I think that's kind of the thing you mentioned. The biggest hurdle is where clients want to create and add things. That's why for me, these custom blocks are the best solution over ACF, because you can give them a visual representation of what they're going to see. They can move things around. I don't know exactly how that would work in Bricks, because I would assume that you would, I don't know exactly how the inner content kind of combination with Bricks would work, but if you're using, Gutenberg to create your content, that's where this is really going to shine.
Near the end, when I kind of made the big switch from using Oxygen to Gutenberg, I was actually using Oxygen just as a kind of theme, and then I was using Gutenberg as the actual inner content and building out pages using that, because it's so much quicker, in my opinion, so much easier, and I quite like the UI, the Gutenberg UI, but I know it's not for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to bring up real quick, while you don't have to answer it at this second, but you were the one that came up with the idea of the person on stream nominating who comes next. So you don't need to answer at this moment if you don't know, but be thinking about who you want me to try to get on.
I have been, yeah. I have what I thought about that I need to start thinking about, but I haven't actually done that yet. So I need to have a think.
So what do you think would be the best block for somebody to try to create themselves? Like as your very first one, we've obviously shown the hero, and that's relatively straightforward, but maybe another one that you could think of as a good first block to try that would be practical?
I mean, for stuff like, so on my personal website, which I have this like avatar image, and one thing that Generate Blocks doesn't support is getting the user avatar. Actually, it's probably a better example is on the dashboard page. The Generate Blocks dynamic data doesn't support getting the current logged in user's avatar. So I built myself a custom block that basically returns, it says get the current user's avatar, and just returns that, and I can then just drag that block in as an avatar, user avatar block kind of thing.
So if you're building like membership type dynamic, super heavily dynamic sites like that, there's tons of use cases.
Yeah, so anything that if you go on the internet, I mean, there's hundreds and thousands of shortcode snippets on the internet. Anything that has been created as a snippet can literally just be copied and pasted directly into Blockstudio. And all of that does is it takes the shortcode block, which normally is just text with brackets and you pass in the IDs or the variables, and it just makes it more visual. So, if it's a shortcode that takes up quite a bit of space, that will render in the back end, making the experience of what you're going to see in the back end, more closer to what the front end is and stuff. And again, you can map all of the shortcode variables, like if you've got like an ID that you have to pass into, you can map that into the sidebar of just a field, a text field or whatever. And so it just makes the whole experience closer, so that the core blocks and the generate blocks, and then your custom blocks or your custom stuff closer together, because they all have a similar feel. You're going to be a sidebar, and the content's going to render in the editor, rather than using a shortcode, which you're back to the flexible content issue and ACF field issue, where you don't actually see what it looks like. So yeah, anything that uses shortcodes, you can pretty much just copy and paste directly into a Blockstudio, give it a name, and you're done.
That's super cool. Yeah, Zach, what you're describing is pretty much exactly what Taylor has said, before he made the full jump to Generate Press and Generate Blocks. Oxygen is your header, footer, dynamic templates, and then Gutenberg for the content. And that's where this works so well. I think it goes back to what I've said multiple times about this being a visual representation of what you're going to see. That's why it's so powerful. So,
and also being able to set, with the modal block, for example, being able to not have to worry about adding all those classes and stuff makes it, even more of a kind of set forget, and not having the client worry about, I need to make sure I add 5 classes on this one, then this one, then this one.
Yeah.
They just have to worry about adding in the content.
Yep, absolutely. I wanted to mention, while we're still here, I might be speaking a little bit out of turn for you, Taylor, but I wanted to give you a plug that with this kind of stuff, Taylor is extremely adept with these custom code solutions. So if you need help with this, you can hire him, and him and I have worked together. If you need Taylor's help, definitely reach out. I'll put his information in the description. So, what other questions do we have? Anybody else at this moment? We're coming up on an hour. I think we've gotten a pretty good overview of this, shown behind the scenes and under the hood a bit, and some practical examples, talked about it a good bit. I know that this is probably a lot to take in your first go. This is one of those where you're going to want to play with it and explore it a little bit. Let's see. Antonio says Lazy Blocks has an interesting approach. Do you know what that is?
Have a look. I've seen it linked, and I had a quick look on my phone when I was the other day. Is it this one? No, that's some random website. This one, okay, this is a web. This one I'm guessing you're talking about. So let's go to some screenshots. Let's just open these up and have a look. Oh. So yeah, I mean, so they have a similar kind of system. Theirs is a tiny bit more WYSIWYG. So you kind of drag and dropping. You got your text field, your image field, and they use a kind of a more visual approach to creating the fields. And then it generates, and then that code, I'm guessing, is the same as the Blockstudio editor. So I guess that if you want to have a WYSIWYG field builder, then you can do that. But at the end of the day, you still have to build the PHP, the HTML markup. It looks like, you still have to build the HTML markup with HTML or PHP rather than, the PainGrowing way, or the way that PainGrowing are kind of doing it. So for me, considering I'm the only one that's going to be building the custom blocks and the client doesn't need to have access to it, it's a lot cleaner or quicker for me to just write it into a JSON file that they use, the block.json. But some people prefer the WYSIWYG. And also, I mean, I don't know if they have any exporting features, but I can just copy and paste the field code and put it directly into another site, or copy it from the documentation, whereas this doesn't look like you have to go in manually and create each field. I don't know, I haven't used it, that's just a guess. But yeah, you can see they use a similar thing with the text and the information.
I forgot that question did come up about the portability, and it's super easy to copy and paste the code from site to site or export import. Is it just a little JSON export that it gives you?
I don't know. Lazy Blocks allows you to it gives you a zip file for Blockstudio.
That's what I meant. Yeah, perfect.
Apparently, Lazy Blocks also supports import export, which is fine. My question is, Brad, across a couple hundred sites, do you handle pushing out an update to your block you've made? Sometimes it depends, because it depends on the block. I don't have a solution at the moment, but if you use something like MainWP, you can very easily. So because it is in the plugin list, because it actually is literally just a plugin. So you can see here, Taylor Drayson blocks. If I deactivate that, my blocks will all break. So if you use something like MainWP that allows pushing plugins, your own custom plugins, then you can do that. And things like that. For me, I personally don't, because sometimes I use a block as a base and then I build upon it for the specific client requirements. And so pushing an update could break it, kind of thing. And normally once a block is built, if one of the pre-made blocks is built, I don't really need to kind of I don't really need to change it, because I try and build all of my blocks so that they are configurable. So rather than building the slider block, for example, going back to this one, rather than building the slider block exactly to the requirements that this one client site needed, if I just build all of the settings into the block, then there's no more that I need to do in terms of, styling or giving features, because they have all of the features there. It's just a matter of toggling them on and off. And so I try and make all my blocks as set and forget as I can, so that should I need any settings, they're already in there. It's just a matter of enabling them.
The other thing I think worth considering too is that the vast majority of these blocks, unless you're relying on some kind of third-party JavaScript library, don't really have any other dependencies, because it's HTML, CSS, and maybe some vanilla JavaScript. So there shouldn't be breaking changes, right?
Unless something changes from Gutenberg or GB, your blocks will get updated, and if Gutenberg changed the way that React blocks are actually created, then that is handled by Blockstudio. So I'm guessing Dennis will release an update, and you update your Blockstudio plugin, and all your other blocks will be fine. But because you have pure control over the HTML and the CSS, And unless you're relying on some Gutenberg content styling that comes directly from Gutenberg that they on queue, your blocks are not going to change. Your blocks are going to be the exact same no matter what theme you use and things like that. So for the most part, your blocks are less likely to break than using a block library like Cadence or a slider block that they decide, actually, I'm going to change I'm going to change the way that the HTML is rendered.
Kyle, totally fair. I think that there are use cases where this works, but it's kind of like the making the transition to generate blocks and generate press. For me, Taylor has been on my case for a long time to do these, to explore these blocks more, and I think they're extremely cool. But for the types of sites that I'm working on lately, there are some use cases like this slider where it's just super cool. But
I think that in very, very few use cases, most people probably won't need to be building custom blocks like I probably do on some of my like personal sites. But for, this is part of the reason that I wanted to build out WP Block Vault, is create a lot of commonly used sections and blocks that a lot of people rely on third-party plugins, alongside the stack that you already use, just for this one feature. So that was why I wanted to try and make the barrier to entry for these custom blocks, that you don't need to know how it works. It's just a matter of, I want this in my page. Okay, let me download the slider block that's already been made for me, and I can just import it and use it as is, kind of thing.
Well, there you go, Kyle.
That would be
WP Block Vault.
I think most people would probably want to use it. So
I was trying to pull up the link again. Drop that link again in chat for your sign up page for WP Block Vault.
Yeah,
I think that's going to be a super cool resource. So, let's see. If you want to jump into plugin development, do you think this would be a good starting point? I've never built a plugin. Well, I've actually built a plugin for the first time ever. As of just, I think that they're similar, but also different in terms of the approach. There's a lot of stuff that I've had to dig through, different documentation that I've never seen before. There's a lot of specific requirements for WordPress plugins in terms of their licensing and structure. And just yesterday, I was working on the way that you upload the plugins to the repository. It's just like there's other things that I don't think are quite a parallel with this. Similar in principle, but
I mean, because of obviously Blockstudio uses a plugin for you to store your blocks, but outside of that, everything is done inside of the editor, and creating new blocks, deleting blocks, importing, exporting is all handled inside of Blockstudio. So you don't actually ever really touch the plugin or that you've created, except for activating it, and that's about it. So in terms of get a good starting point, if you want to actually the plugin development itself of creating page, like on options page or settings page and all of that, no. But for improving your PHP skills, then yes,
yeah,
I think it can help.
Well, if there's a couple more questions, I'd love to field those, but I think you've done an awesome job giving us a behind the scenes look, man. I really appreciate you taking the time for this. At a full hour, I think that's a pretty amazing overview. I don't know that there's actually any content like this, really. I've not come across a sort of like overview to this extent of custom blocks, specifically for Blockstudio. I've actually intended to do a video on Blockstudio for a while, but this is great.
Blockstudio is quite new. I know that there's quite a few different ones out there, like we said, PainGrowing, ACF blocks and things. There's quite a bit on ACF blocks out there already, which you can pretty much pull in anything from ACF blocks that's been created. You can pull in. The only thing is just the way that the fields and stuff are registered are just slightly different.
Well, again, visit snippetclub.com. Check out Taylor. I really appreciate you taking the time. Also, who are you nominating? That's the other thing we got to figure out.
I am going to nominate Dave Foy.
Oh, yes. Awesome. That is a great one. I love Dave. I don't think we'll have any problem getting him on. He's a good dude. We'll talk about bricks, actually. That'll be really fun. We can talk about bricks. We can talk about like courses, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, I'm actually super fired up about that. That's a great nomination.
I'd like to see stuff on courses. 'Cause
Yeah.
I know he's good at that stuff. So
Fantastic. Well, cool. Thank you everybody for hanging out. This is another awesome Friday stream. I'll see when I can get Dave on and we'll get that scheduled. So Taylor, you're awesome, dude. Thank you so much.
thanks for having me. It's been good, and I hope everyone that kind of showed how Blockstudio works or how I use custom blocks.
Yeah, I think that's a great overview. All right, everybody. We will see you next Friday. Same bad time, same bad place. Peace.